I think spreadsheets are probably the singular most important application developed on the personal computer. Spreadsheets were the fuse that sparked the computer revolution. In the 1980s, when VisiCalc was released, it became the killer app, the first killer app. People were purchasing computers just to use a spreadsheet. My gosh, they were so expensive back in the day. Thousands of dollars spent for a very simple tool, the spreadsheet, but it was a game changer as far as the business community was concerned. And I believe that the computer revolution was started based on the spreadsheet. In a lot of ways, we're going full circle today, delivering this webinar to you by personal computer over the internet. This, if we look back in the legacy, this all sort of began with the release of the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is just that important a tool. And I think we sometimes lose track of that. We sometimes just kind of recognize that spreadsheets are there and they seem to have always been there, and we just accept them as kind of a backdrop in the entire computer and application space. But oh my gosh, they are so important and they're so relevant in the growth of my industry of the personal computer and productivity space. Spreadsheets are tremendously important. Now, today's tutorial is slightly different than normal. Just a couple months ago, I released a pretty comprehensive overview, an introduction to Google Sheets for beginners. I'm going to refer to that. I'm going to use that part of that video to introduce you here now, because I spent a lot of time working on it and I think I packaged it quite well. So we'll use that as the basis to introduce you to the basis of the spreadsheets, of using spreadsheets. And then once that is done, I'll come back and I'll fill in the blanks. There's a few things that I want to touch on specifically for Webinar Wednesday, and then we'll of course get to the Q&A. But let's start with not too far in the Wayback Machine. Just a couple months ago, I released this video as we introduced you to the humble, not so humble, really important spreadsheet. And let's start looking at spreadsheets right within Google Drive. We're going to use Google Sheets, which is Google's version of the spreadsheet, for our demonstration today. Now, the beauty of spreadsheets is they all work pretty much identically. In fact, when I create a new spreadsheet here in Google Sheets, the spreadsheet that I'm looking at doesn't look a lot different from the original spreadsheet VisiCalc back in 1979. And the main function, the main way that the spreadsheet works, is pretty much identical over all of these years. The spreadsheet is a marvel of efficiency and simplicity. Although it could get incredibly complicated and do incredibly detailed and complicated things, the basic way spreadsheets work is actually quite elegant and simple. Spreadsheets are broken down into three basic areas. We have rows of information from top to bottom. We have columns of information from right to left, and we have regions where we select both rows and columns, and we select region, and that's called a range. We also have inside of the spreadsheet, the individual squares are called cells. Cells are very important. They're the building blocks of spreadsheets, and cells contain the data that spreadsheets work on. Now, your data can be text, it can be numbers, it can be dates, it can be formulas, or it can be calculations. We can put lots of different data types into the cell, and how we use those cells and how those cells react to the other cells around them is really how a spreadsheet ends up working and being valuable to us. I think I should just dive in and create a simple spreadsheet. The easiest way for you to understand it is to see it in a practical application. So this is the simplest of applications. Let's say we're just trying to keep track of sales of an item in a store. So we're going to start with the date as our first data type, and we're going to have our data going from top to bottom. We're going to have columns. So I'm going to put the date in the first column, and I just type it into the cell. Actually, when I type it into the cell, I'm typing it into the equation bar here as well. The information that happens in this bar gets reflected in here, but sometimes it will look different. Sometimes we'll see a formula or a calculation in this bar, and we'll see the results in the cell. That's one of the most important things to get your head around in spreadsheets, is where the input information is generated. So even though we feel like we're clicking in the cell, we're actually clicking in the formula bar as we're entering the information. So next we're going to put date. The next thing we'll put down sales. And see, I click back up on the top bar, and you'll see that when I type it in, it's reflected back down here in the cell itself. Sales, and then we're going to put down income, how much money we're making from each sale. And then, so those are hard numbers. Those are numbers that we put in, which is just kind of one piece of data for each cell. But now I want to put in a dynamic piece of data. I want to put in a calculation. I want this to be the average that we earn from each sale. And so that now gives us a structure. We're going to show you a lot of the basis of spreadsheets just by showing you how these 4 columns work and the information that we put in. They're quite simple, as I say, but you can take them to make them very sophisticated based on these principles. Let's start with data types. We're going to start with a date. So we can just type in to this field, we can type in November 1st. Now, spreadsheets are smart enough to recognize the data type that you're putting in. If I put a $ before a number, they know that it's a currency. If I put in a date like this, they know that it's a date. And I can display the date in numerical format or in words and numbers format as it is. Now, spreadsheets are so smart that they recognize that if I've put in November 1st, see how it's converted it here into numerical format in the top? That's pretty smart. I think we'll agree. Gets even smarter. See that little square in the bottom there? If I click on that and drag it down, I'm going to convert the cell into a range of cells. Remember I talked about ranges? And the spreadsheet is going to recognize that I probably want to put sequential dates in. So when I release my cursor, it does. It puts the count of days in based on the range that I selected. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to show you how it gets even more sophisticated. That's extending a range based on a single cell. Watch what happens if I put in November 8th. So we're going to say once a week that we're going to keep track. So instead of November 1st, I'm going to put in November 8th and watch what happens. I select both days now for my range, and then I extend it down again with the clicking and pulling down on the square. And how intelligent is that? It recognizes that we want every 7 days for it to be the date, once a week, and it fills in the range based on that every 7 days. Isn't that amazing? That shows you the built-in intelligence of the spreadsheet. And all of these features are built to help us be more efficient in the management and manipulation of our information. So let's leave this at once a week. And let's say in week 1, I'm gonna fast forward the video now. I'm gonna enter in some sales numbers and some income for this range of dates. Okay, I've entered some just random numbers in here that could represent how many sales we made in each of these weeks and how much income we got from each of these weeks. Now, we want to change the format. We're happy to leave the sales numbers as they are because that's just units sold. That could be just a straight up number. But here under income, I want to change this into currency. So I select all of the range that I want, or I could simply collect in the very top of the column, and I can go under the format menu, go under number, and I can choose to change the number to a currency. I can choose to change it to US dollars, or I can change it to another currency if I choose to. I'm going to change this to US dollars. And now we see that the format has changed. It's got the dollar sign and it's got the cent sign added. Now it is where it gets exciting though. This next field here, this next cell, I want to make a calculation cell. I want this cell to calculate the average sale based on that income. So this is going to be a calculation. And how we set up a calculation, I'm going to show you the manual way. We can use these tools up here, which will help us build calculations, but we can also just click in the formula field, and I'm going to say it equals, and I just put in the equal sign, and then I'm going to say it equals the income. I click on the cell, and there's a reason I click on the cell as opposed to typing in the number. I click on the cell because I want it to calculate on it, and that's divided by the number of sales. And that tells me that the average sale for this week was $10.59. Now that is a calculation. The reason that we made the calculation happen on the cells instead of the numbers is what happens if we need to correct the sales number for this week. Maybe we actually sold 70 this week. And so now we see our average changes based on those numbers. Or we forgot, we missed a deposit and we actually sold $1,200 worth. And again, we see that the average changes based on those numbers. That shows you the beginning of the power of the calculation capabilities of Excel. This feature here alone, the ability to make one cell, calculate based on another cell is in many ways the heart and what the whole spreadsheet revolution was built on. And it's just incremental from here. It just gets more and more complicated and more valuable as far as the calculations that we can occur, but they all are all still kind of subsets of this particular calculation. Now this is where it gets cool, because you saw me extend the range for dates. I can also extend the range for the cells. Now you see here it says cell C2 divided by cell B2. These are the designations, C and B. If I extend this down, it will then take and it will include and change based on the row it's in, what the calculation cells are. So if we now click on the third row, the calculation, it changes to C3 divided by B3, and so on, so forth, all the way down. You'll see it changes with each of the different rows that I go into. And that's the incredible power of these automatic calculations that are built in. Now, I did this first calculation manually, but what I want to do now is I want to go down to the end of our range, and I want to know what our total income is. So I'm going to put in a little total here. And I'm going to say into this cell here, I want this to equal all of these. So how do we create that calculation? I say it equals the sum. And then I highlight the range, hit return, and it will calculate the sum of all of the different figures within this range of cells. That's the way that I think people who have been using spreadsheets for a while, because we just know a lot of these different basic calculation terms. But we could also just click here in this field and then choose this function tool here, which allows us to choose the sum. And if we choose the sum, it then fills it in. We select the range that we want it and hit return, and we get the calculation. So if we change any of the numbers here inside of this, you'll see that the sum changes with that, as does the average. Did you notice there when I pulled down this menu that there was another calculation that was available to us as well? Did you see in the functions it also had average, count, maximum, minimum? So if I'd wanted to, instead of putting in the equation for the average here, I could have just used the average function here. Now, that is really the simplest way to go over the basic functions of the spreadsheet. Now, I think in a lot of ways that basic application that we've just looked at of calculations, averages, columns, rows, that teaches you the basics of all spreadsheets. All spreadsheets are built on those basic processes. We can do some other simple things, like we can make information a little easier to understand by choosing cells and coloring cells, changing the font, etc. But there's another aspect of the spreadsheets other than the entering of the data. It's the organizing of the data to make it make sense to us, which makes spreadsheets incredibly valuable for doing business analytics and just being in control of your numbers. So creating calculations, very useful. But what happens if we want to know, say, which is our best month for sales and which is our worst month for sales? So I can go through and I can kind of noodle it out and figure out here, but instead I can sort based on the information in the cells. And I could choose to sort this based on my average month sales. And all I do is watch this. I click here on this drop-down menu and I say, sort this sheet from A to Z. And a little bit of magic again happens here, is it's going to then sort all of the information that's in these cells from the smallest number to the largest number. But it's in this column, in the sales column. And it says November 15th, that week was our smallest number of sales. Whereas November 29th was our largest number of sales, where we had the most sales. So it reorganizes the information, and it doesn't just reorganize the column, but it organizes the whole sheet, recognizing that the date is related to the number of sales, is related to the income, is related to the average, that there's a relationship laterally with all of this information as well. But again, if I was trying to analyze my business, the number of sales might not be as important to me as the total income, or even more important perhaps, is what's my average sale? For which month am I making the most money from each sale? So again, I can use the drop down menu over here and again resort the sheet based on that information. And it turns out that November is my worst month, whereas the one that we thought was our worst month of sales, we had our highest average sales per highest average per sale that month. So this is where the analyzing of the data and the manipulation of the data comes in. And again, a very simple example of the power of the spreadsheet for this application. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is how we use spreadsheets for managing other data. Spreadsheets are kind of the perfect intermediary between different applications that contain data, things like accounting packages or research tools. All of those tools, all of the different packages, if you want to export information from them, they're going to boil it down into a database format, into something that's a logical database, which we can then import into our spreadsheet in order to manipulate that information and to be able to work it the way that we want. So Google Sheets, as all of the other spreadsheets do as well, supports multiple data type formats. And those formats really break down to three basic formats, I think. And we can see them here. If I choose this document here, and I choose to download this document, you can see I can download this document as an Excel spreadsheet, an XLS, which means you can open it natively in Microsoft Excel, probably the most popular spreadsheet other than Google Sheets, I'm sure maybe it's more popular, but it's been around longer. Into Microsoft Excel, you can also export it into these two formats here, which you are going to see a lot, CSV and TSV. These are comma separated values and tab separated values. What that means is the information is going to come in rows and columns, and it's going to use either tabs. If you're entering data and you hit the tab key, it's going to have tabs between each of the columns for information, or it's going to have commas between each of the rows for demarcating the information. It means that we can import into our spreadsheet and work with data from a variety of different applications. I'll do it quickly. One of the other things, I'll do it quickly and show you. And I actually, to show it to you, I'm going to create a second sheet in this document. One of the cool things within Google Sheets is you can have commas between each of the rows for demarcating the information. It means that we can import into our spreadsheet and work with data from a variety of different applications. I'll do it quickly. One of the other things, I'll do it quickly and show you. And to show it to you, I'm going to create a second sheet in this document. One of the cool things within Google Sheets is you can have multiple sheets within the same document, and they can relate back and forth to each other. So you can create increasingly complex documents using this feature. But I'm opening a second sheet here so that I can import into here. I can import content from my computer's hard drive. And I'm just going to navigate through into my downloads folder. And I was doing some research on keywords for a video. And here is the keyword research that I did. And you can see that I brought it from whichever application it came in, but you can see that CSV. You can see that format that we were talking about. And here comes the different questions. And here is that data that was imported. It has keywords. It has some other statistics based on this is a research document to help me determine what the best title is going to be for a YouTube video. It doesn't really matter what the content is. I can sort the information as I've now imported it here into this spreadsheet. So this intermediary, the fact that Google Sheets works and plays well with others. We can import information from Microsoft or from these comma or tab delimited formats, and we can export our information so that it can be ingested by those applications as well. Learning to master the spreadsheet is one of the most valuable tools that you can do in order to really take control of the business aspect of your computer and online life. Spreadsheets continue to evolve, but they still harken back to the most basic and simple principles that were there in 1979 in VisiCalc. One has to wonder where we'd be without the humble spreadsheet. I want to fill in a few of the blanks that I didn't cover in that little tutorial on some of the basis of spreadsheets now. And one of the things that I didn't really talk about inside of the initial tutorial here was the fact that spreadsheets don't just have numerical data. You can have text-based data. You can have all sorts of data inside of a spreadsheet. And the more types of data and the more information you have in the spreadsheet, the bigger the challenge it is to be able to kind of gain control over the spreadsheets itself. And I'm speaking of, if you look at this sheet here, it's full of information, and it might be hard for you to figure out exactly what it is you're looking for by looking at this. You have to search because of small text, and we have colored the type to make it a little bit easier. And that's a clue to the formatting tip that I wanted to show you now, is that we have a lot of options as far as formatting the visual appearance of the spreadsheet to make it easier for us to discern the most important information that's on that spreadsheet. And everything on the spreadsheet, every cell, we can customize to a large extent, or row or column for that matter. So here we see that I've color-coded text for some purposes, and it doesn't matter really what the purpose is, but you recognize your eye is going to be drawn to the red or to the blue and recognize that reflects something different. But you can go beyond that, and that we can select rows or we can select individual cells. And by going up in the formatting menu, we can choose fill colors, which is going to put a different colored background into each one of the spreadsheets. This is a technique that I use all of the time to help me demark different types of information or different kind of current information that I want to be paying attention to and I want to be looking at. And you can see that when we start to do that, it starts to segment the information on the page in a way that makes it easier for you to identify what's happening. It makes the spreadsheet look more appealing, but it also helps you to define different categories of information or different areas of information that's important to you. That's tip number one. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that the spreadsheet, when we think of the spreadsheet, we think of one large calculating sheet. But in fact, a spreadsheet file can represent multiple pages or multiple sheets in the same file, which gives us the opportunity to do some pretty big modeling of different financial projections or all sorts of different data sets that we can demark the information on different pages, or we can put the information in on different pages and have summaries and have it all reflected, say, on a home page. Let me show you. I've got here a very simple model. I've got a summary page here, which is my main spreadsheet, which we'll just say is sales. And we see that we've got week 1 sales numbers. Where do they come from? If we look down here in the bottom, we see that we can have multiple different pages on the same spreadsheet. So here under week 1, I've put in the numbers. And what I've done, I put in the sales totals from Monday through Friday Sunday of that particular week. And this this cell here, you see it equals week 1 cell. So it actually equals this cell here in the on the second page, and I'll show you how we do that. We'll do that, and we'll do that on the we'll do that with the second week here. We'll just say equals, and then I'm going to go to the second week, and I'm going to put in the total page for that right there. It equals that. So now it's going to say 0, right? But if as you're working your way through building all sorts of different data up, you're in the second week and you start putting in sales figures for this week, and we'll put in 87, we'll just put in 2 days, 87 and $145. Now let's go back to our summary page, and we see those numbers are reflected on the fly, where one sheet is pulling data from another sheet in the same file. So you can see how we can build some pretty enormous models. And these links can actually go to external data sources as well. If you're gathering data in another area, bringing them into a spreadsheet, you can link the spreadsheets through the cells, so you can create some really incredibly complex numerical models. But that's another way of structuring information, making the spreadsheet super useful for us. The last thing I'm going to show you is the sharing option. And we've talked about this with Google Docs and Google Drive, but spreadsheets, you have all of the same opportunities to be able to share this spreadsheet with others. Let's give it a name, sample 1. So you can make it a collaborative document, or you can make it a document that you can just share with others to view. All of the same options as far as who has access to it, and all of the different sharing potential, as well as creating a web link that you share with others to view a document, can be done on spreadsheets as well. So all of the sharing and collaboration aspects that is kind of almost the hallmark of the rest of Google Docs is, of course, built in to the spreadsheet as well. You know, we've gone through, with the spreadsheet, it's almost difficult to know where to start and where to stop. There just are so many different things we can do. But I think what I'll do is I'll throw it back to you now, and we'll spend the rest of today in Q&A.